Hello and welcome to PodCoder. In the previous part, we have successfully developed our authentication routes for endpoints. In this part, we'll learn about the API resources. So what are API resources? Whenever we are working on any API, we want to have some response to the application users whenever they are accessing this endpoint or this route. And also, we want a transformation layer to transform our Eloquent model into a JSON response. So what do I mean by that? Let me explain it with an example. Suppose we have a route and it's a GET request. So we'll call it as opportunities. And this will call opportunity controller. So it's opportunity controller and it will call index method. And if I go to the HTTP controllers and opportunity controller, here inside the index method, what we are going to do is we are going to return the opportunity and we need to paginate it because I want to just return 10 elements. And right now, if I go to my postman, here what we need is to create another endpoint or call this endpoint, and we called it as opportunities. And suppose right now if I call it, you can see here we get 10 elements as we paginate it. Here we have the current page and we have data, which are the 10 elements, first 10 elements from this endpoint. And here if you look at each element, what we have is basically the whole columns of this item inside the database. And if suppose I go to the opportunities and select from the opportunities, you can see here we have the ID, we have the title, we have the description, category ID, and so on. And basically what we are doing here is just returning all the columns inside the database from this opportunity element there. So this is not the response that we want. Basically, sometimes suppose we want to return only the ID, we want to return title and description, and also instead of this category ID and country ID, which are just bare IDs, we want to return the country and category. So, or we want to just format this, date. We don't want this format. Just we want to format it in some other formats, and we want to return it to the user. So, how we can do that? How we can transform this output and this response? So we can do it with the API resources. So API resources basically does everything, and Laravel hopefully provides a really nice way to do these API resources. If you go to the laravel.com, here inside the Eloquent ORM, you have something called API resources, and here at the introduction part it clearly says everything. And also to generate these API resources, what you can do is just use the make resource command, artisan command, and what it will do is it will create a resources directory inside your app HTTP. And then how you can do that, it's really simple by PHP artisan make resource and the name of your resource. Suppose here we want to create something. Let me just clear this one and I'm going to clear everything. And suppose here what we want is we want to create an opportunity resource because we are working on opportunities. What we need to do is just write PHP artisan make resource and just name our resource. So we'll call it as opportunity. And if I hit enter, you can see here this resource is created successfully. And also if I just go to the HTTP folder, here you can see we have a new directory called resources, and if I expand it, here we have the opportunity. And if I click on opportunity, we can see it is a class which extends JSON resource. And here we have a public function to array method where we can transform our response. And also here if I go to back to my opportunity controller, here we do not returning a single element or a single what we can say resource. Rather we are returning a collection of resources. So how we can transform this whole collection? So hopefully Laravel provides something called resource collections for that to handle. And how we can generate this resource collection, it is really easy. What we can do is just the same as creating a resource. What we need is just to append this dash dash collection to it, or we can do is to add the collection to our resource, and that's it. So I'm going with the second method. So basically we have this resource called opportunity, and what I'm going to do is to just append the collection to it. And if I press the enter, you can see that right now what we have is we have the resource collection created successfully. And if I just go back to the resources directory here, we can see we have the opportunity collection. But if I click on it, it is different from the resource. Basically here we have a class opportunity collection and extends resource collection. If you remember from the opportunity, here we are extending the JSON resource. So it is different. And right now what we want is, what we need to call this created classes, and it's really easy. Let me first of all turn on the server, and then I'm going to back to the opportunity controller, and here I don't want to return this collection. What I want is to create a new opportunity collection, and here after that what I'm going to do is returning the opportunity. Make sure that this opportunity is from app models opportunity, not from the HTTP resources. And then we want to paginate, so paginate 10 elements. And right now if I go back to my postman and if I call it again, you can see still we have the same result. So why we have the same result still? Because we are not transforming anything inside our resource file here inside the resources opportunity. We are just returning whatever the parents or the parent just sending to us, or just passing to this function. So here inside this toArray function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return an array, and this array right now I'm just going to return the ID. So this dot ID, and right now if I save it and if I go back inside the postman and if I call it again, you can see that right now we have only the IDs as our response, and see how it is really easy to handle. And if I suppose I want to add the title, I'm just going to add the title and add this, and I'll call it what we have the title. So make sure that this value, the ID, the title, these are basically our the database or the table columns. And if I go back to the here inside my database migrations and inside the opportunities table, here you can see we have the ID, we have the title, we have the description, and we have the category ID and country IDs and so on. So here inside the opportunity resource, and we are just passing these columns and whatever column or columns we want to pass to the user. And one thing else that I want to show it to you is here that right now if I refresh it, you can see that here we have the ID and we have the title. Here we have the title, a bare title, and suppose you want to just call it something else like opportunity title, you can do that. It's nothing. It's like you can transform in any way that you want, and if I refresh it, you can see that right now we have it. So basically here you have the transformation layer inside your API resource, and you can transform this data in any format that you want and pass it to the user. And also it is really convenient because let me show it with something else. Suppose here we have the category ID by default, and if we change it, suppose, and if I return it as this dot category ID, and here you can see we have the same thing as it is inside our database. And let me show it here inside opportunity database. We have this convention of category underscore ID. But suppose in your Flutter code, or inside your Flutter in the Dart code, or inside the front end inside the JavaScript, you have the convention of camel case, not this underscore. So you can do that as well. So here what you can do is just you can call it as category and ID. So basically you're using the camel case convention here. And suppose if I save it and come back here, you can see that here we have the category ID. But as I mentioned earlier, we do not want this bare ID. Rather, what we want is the category. So what we want is not this ID, rather we want a category to return. Basically a category related to this column, because this opportunity, if I go to the opportunities table, here we have this category ID, and this category ID is basically belongs to the ID on table categories. So these are related to each other, these two tables, the category table and also these opportunities. So what we want is not to just pass this category ID, rather what we want is to pass the category related to this opportunity row. So how we can do that is just creating another resource for the category as the same way we created for this opportunity. So I'm going to stop the server and I'm going to just call that PHP artisan make resource, and I want to put it inside another directory called lookups and then the category. So if I press enter, you can see the resources created. And if I go back to the resources, we can see that right now we have another directory or folder called lookups, and inside that we have the category. And the same way this category extends the JSON resource. And right now what we want is we need to transform it here inside the toArray method. So basically what we want is to pass the ID, and basically it is this ID, and also we have the name. We can pass just this name, so that's it. And this ID, sorry, not semicolon, it should be comma, and this name and ID, these are just, as I mentioned earlier, coming from the categories table. We have here just ID and name. So how we can use this resource, let me first of all run the server again, and here what we have is inside the opportunity, make sure that this opportunity is coming from the resources inside the resource folder, and we have the opportunity. And if I go back here for the category, what I can do is just call this class or create an instance of that class, new category, and make sure that this category is coming from the app HTTP resources and lookups. So what we want is to pass this category, and this category is basically a relationship that an Eloquent relationship that we are going to create it, and this right now doesn't exist. And suppose if I save it like this and just refresh my endpoint, you can see we have null. Why we have null? Because we don't have, or we didn't create this relationship yet. So how we can create this relationship? I'm going to the models, and inside the models, I'm just opening this opportunity model, and here basically we can create a relationship, an Eloquent relationship. So public function category, and this category is basically return this, or this opportunity belongs to the category, and make sure that this category is from the app models and lookup. So this is a model, not a resource. So right now if I save it, basically we created this relationship, and we just call it here inside the resource opportunity. So we call it that this category. So this category is basically this relationships that we created. And right now if I refresh it, you can see that hopefully we have the category, not ID anymore. So the category belongs or related to this opportunity, and you can see it is different for all the elements. So here we have the internship, here we have the scholarship, and so on. Okay, and suppose we want the same thing for our country, and suppose for the country also we have the country ID, but we don't want to return the country ID, rather we want to return the country. So what we can do is we can just go back here and just run PHP artisan make resource, and we just call it as lookup. Inside lookups directory we call it as country, and we create the country resource file. The same way as the category, I'm just going to return ID. So this dot ID, ID of this country, and then we want the name, so it should be this name. And you can remember that the country has something called fun code, and it is basically in the data. So let me minimize this one. If I go to the countries table, here we have the fun underscore code and we have the country underscore code, but we don't want the underscore convention, we want the camel case one. We can transform it as a fun code, and this is basically this fun underscore code. So at the right hand side you have the column name. Just make sure that you just follow the same name as it is inside your database. And I'm not going to use the country code right now for demonstration. Later on I'm going to use it. And here inside our opportunity resource, what we are going to do is we are going to call the country, and this country is coming from the app HTTP resource, and we just going to pass this country. And as I mentioned before, this country is a relationship. And right now if I just do it like this, and if I also, sorry, the server is not running, let me run the server, and if I call it again, you can see that right now we have the null. Why? Because we didn't create this relationship. So I'm going back to the models, and inside the opportunity, same way as the category, I'm just going to copy and paste it, and I'll call it as country. And so basically this belongs to the country, not the category anymore. So the country, and this country is coming from the app models and lookups. So that's it. And if I go back and refresh it, here you can see we have the country and ID, name, and phone code. And if I suppose want to add something else to this country, suppose the country code that I didn't add it before, so the same thing, you can add it, country underscore code. See how it is easy to transform your response. So right now we have here inside the country, we have 3 elements, and if I refresh it, you can see we have the country code as well related to this opportunity. So this is how we can transform our response, and we can transform it in any way we want. And so we created these relationships, and we returned the category, and also we returned the country. How about the other things? Suppose if I go back to the opportunities table, we have here deadline, which is a timestamp, and also we have this created by, which is coming from the users table, you can see here. So the same thing as we followed with the country and category, what we can do is we can create or we can transform these things. Suppose I'm going to do it with the deadline, and so deadline is a timestamp, and if I just return it like this, so this dot deadline, and if I return it like this, and if I refresh it here, you can see we have this timestamp here, and basically it is in this format. So it's a time, it's a date and time, and you say I want to transform it in some other formats, or I don't want this date time format, I want it in some other format. So how you can do that? So hopefully there is a library, a PHP library called Carbon, and it's if you go to the carbon.netspot.com, and here you have the docs and API. So if you go to this string formatting, because you want to format it as a string, you can see here you have many formats. Suppose here you just want to return the date, you want to return it in this format, December 25th of something, or you want to format it something like this, Thursday, December 25th, and you have the year and the time with also AM or PM. So how you can transform this one, just to call this a today something. I mean, I'm just going to copy this one, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to append it to this one. But there is a problem. let me remove the semicolon. Here we have this today date time string. But right now, if I just go and hit this, you can see we have this error. Why? We just called on a function which is called on a string file. So why this is like this? Because if we use this and deadline, by default the model doesn't know that this deadline is a timestamp. So basically we have a timestamp here, it is a timestamp, but our model or Eloquent model doesn't know that this is a timestamp. So it treats it as a string, and we cannot just call this today date time string on a string. So that's why we are getting this error. And if you go back to the Carbon, you can see that they called it on a date, and this is a Carbon like instance or a date time. So that's why we can use this method on it. So how we can transform this deadline into a date time string or in a timestamp. So if you go to the models opportunity, inside the opportunity model, you have something called casts. So if I just add the cast, protected casts, and it's an array, so here you can transform your what we can say your columns. So we have the deadline, and so what we can do is we can say that this deadline is a date time. So this is how we can transform our Eloquent model fields. So right now if I save it and if I refresh it, you can see that we have the deadline and it is in the format that we transform it. So see how easy it is to transform anything here. And the last part that I'm going to show it to you that we can do with this opportunity here is the user. So this user, or the created by, and so this created by is basically we are going to just transform it same as the category and also same as the country. So how you can do that is really easy, and again just create another resource file and just call it as user. So here I'm going to just use the opportunity, this one, and I'll call it as user. And if I create this one, you can see inside the resources we have the user, and for the user what I'm going to do is I'm again going to return the ID related to this user. So we have this ID and we have the first name. By default, if we use it, what we have is, suppose let me don't transform this one again. Right now we can use this one inside our opportunity, and for the created what we have the new user, and this user coming from the app HTTP resources. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to return this user. So this relationship is not exists. So let me go to the models opportunity, and same as this country, I'm going to copy it, paste it. I'm going to call it user. So this belongs to the user inside our user app. That's it. Let me run the server. And right now, if I call it, you can see that we have a null. Why we have a null? Because we have the this user, but right now we created even this relationship and it's coming from this resource. But the problem is that it's looking for a user ID inside the, what we can say, inside this opportunities table. But here we have something else, and this is called created by. So what we can do is just copy this one and go back to the opportunity here inside opportunities, opportunity model. And for this one, so this belongs to the user, but it's called the created by, not the user ID. So this foreign key is created by. And right now, if I save it and if I return it, you can see that we have the user's information. So basically, this returns all the user information which exist inside the users table. And suppose we don't want that, we can transform it here inside our user resource, and we can do, what we can do is just transform it here. So we want the ID, so this ID, we want the first and make sure that here, see, we have the first underscore name and last name, so we don't want that convention. We can change it here, first name, and so this is basically the this and first name, and the same thing we have for the last name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cursor here and here, and I'm going to delete it as, and I call it as last name. And suppose we want this information only, and you can see that we can transform it. And the same thing, what we want is the profile profile picture, and basically this is also the profile picture related to this user. And right now, if I save it and refresh it, you can see that we have this profile picture link as well. So this is how you can transform your Eloquent model, and I mostly covered everything that you want. And basically we have this you know, the category and country that you can transform an Eloquent model, and also the created by. Just make sure that if the name is different, suppose inside the users table, and inside the opportunity, if you go here, we don't have the user ID. Basically by default it's looking for that. You can put the you know, the foreign key name that you have, and also about the deadline, that it was at that time, you can cast it here. So this is how you can play with your Eloquent model, and also with your response that you want to transform. Okay, thank you for watching, and if you didn't subscribe to this channel, kindly subscribe and hit the bell button so you'll be notified about the upcoming videos. The rest of the things that we covered here, and rest of the things that's remained, rest of the fields inside this opportunity, and I'm going to add it, and later I'm going to show it to you. And basically it is the same, that you can add other fields, whatever fields you want. Suppose inside your opportunities here, inside the opportunity table, we have some other fields, like we have the organizer. So it is same as just calling the this one. Just you can add another field here and just call it as organizer, and just return this organizer. That's it. So this is how you can add other fields to it. And suppose you want to add the created add and updated add, so these are automatically added with this timestamp that we have at the end of our Eloquent model. So if I refresh it, right now we have the created add, and this is a timestamp, you can see here. So basically the Laravel knows that this is timestamp, as automatically it's added. So how we can transform it, just this is a timestamp, and we can call some other methods from the what we can say from the Carbon library and string formatting. Suppose I want it in this format, date and time, or to format the date string. So I'm going to copy this one to date time string, and that's it. If I call it like this, and if I refresh it, right now you can see that it's no longer what you can say a timestamp, rather it's a string, and a formatted string. So the same thing what we can do is for the updated add, and this updated add is basically the same as this one, and let's call it updated add. And this is all about the Laravel resources, and I try to cover most of the things that you need. So this is how we can transform our as you can say the Eloquent model, and we can transform our response. So thank you for watching.